To Artopio, the bakery. An early morning at the port of Lavrion in Greece, August 2013. To Artopio. Hearth-warm circles of sesame bread greet our morning mouths. Cinnamon-dusted cups of cappuccino. A crock of fresh white sheep's yogurt, salty and sweet. Honey. The innocence of the young woman making us at home. The table for two and the first slant of sun over the red-tiled rooftops near the waiting, soon carrying sea. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in. Some of you newly, some regularly, some frequently. I'm glad you're all here for show 151 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the sun and salt air-leavened coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Healers and healings was the theme of broadcast 150. From herbalists to psychotherapists, surgeons to metaphysicians, from weaknesses and imbalances to injuries and griefs, suffering to recovering, around the body, the mind, the emotions, and more. And both our experience of them and our witnessing of them. This week we're breaking bread, tasting into and raising a yeasty toast to bread, to the art of making, enjoying, and sharing it. Crust to crumb, historically, culturally, socially, symbolically. And metaphors from life to literature. So, let's explore this theme through croutons of cultural, why not? I always like to flavor it up. Croutons of cultural commentary, poetry, and inquiry I prepared for us. And hopefully all sorts of discovery. Okay, so I'm pulling up here. I thought we would start in with a poem by Pablo Neruda, Ode to Bread. Bread, you rise from flour, water, and fire. Dense or light, flattened or round, you duplicate the mother's rounded womb, and earth's twice-yearly swelling. How simple you are, bread, and how profound. You line up on the baker's powdered trays like silverware or plates or pieces of paper, and suddenly life washes over you. There's the joining of seed and fire, and you're growing all at once like hips, mouths, breasts, mounds of earth, or people's lives. The temperature rises, you're overwhelmed by fullness, the roar of fertility, and suddenly your golden color is fixed. And when your little wombs were seeded, a brown scar laid its burn the length of your two halves, toasted juncture. Now, whole, you are mankind's energy, a miracle often admired, the will to live itself. O bread, familiar to every mouth, we will not kneel before you. Men do not implore unclear gods or obscure angels. We will make our own bread out of sea and soil. We will plant wheat on our earth and the planets, bread for every mouth, for every person, our daily bread. Because we planted seed and grow it, not for one man but for all, there will be enough. There will be bread for all the peoples of the earth. And we will also share with one another whatever has the shape and the flavor of bread. The earth itself, beauty and love, all taste like bread and have its shape, the germination of wheat. Everything exists to be shared, to be freely given, to multiply. This is why, bread, if you flee from mankind's houses, if they hide you away or deny you, if the greedy man pimps for you or the rich man takes you over, if the wheat does not yearn for the furrow and the soil, then, bread, we will refuse to pray. Bread, we will refuse to beg. We will fight for you instead, side by side with the others, with everyone who knows hunger, We will go after you in every river and in the air. We will divide the entire earth among ourselves so that you may germinate, and the earth will go forward with us. Water, fire, and mankind fighting at our side. Crowned with sheaves of wheat, we will win earth and bread for everyone. Then life itself will have the shape of bread, deep and simple, immeasurable and pure. Every living thing will have its share of soil and life, and the bread we eat each morning, everyone's daily bread, will be hallowed and sacred, because it will have been won by the longest and costliest of human struggles. This earthly victory does not have wings. She wears bread on her shoulders instead. Courageously she soars, setting the world free, like a baker borne aloft on the wind. Thank you, Pablo Neruda, very much. That was a new poem for me. Beautiful. Hope you enjoyed that beginning. From Krista Tippett and On Being, and their occasional letter, The Pause. This is April 24th's one, Pause, 2021. It opens this way. Dear friend, she writes, there's an anecdote told about a person who asked a scientist how to make bread from scratch. Well, the scientist said, first, you have to invent the universe. Things that rhyme. Salt air and summer. Warm bread and butter. Rosé and laughter. Innocence and radiance. Journey and memory. Poetry and alchemy. Nature and rapture. Breathing and birthing. Living and loving. Body and soul. From tastingtable.com, where does the expression breaking bread come from? In there they say bread is something so unique to humanity that we have all but built our entire modern culture around it. Though, quote, breaking bread is an idiom commonly referenced as originating in Christianity, it is in early Judaism that the ritual of breaking bread began. According to the Messianic feast, Jews see the ritual of breaking bread as a progression from natural to spiritual. In Scripture, the breaking of bread first came up when God gave the law to Moses to break 12 loaves on the Sabbath. The bread was broken by hand because Jewish law prohibited using knives on the Sabbath. Apart from this, the bread of ancient times was far harder than the soft bread we're familiar with today. Therefore, as one could not tear away at the loaf, breaking the bread was the only way it could be shared amongst a family or a group. There's an interesting Latin origin of the word companion. According to the Idaho State Journal, it pairs a word for with, com, with a term for bread, panis. So, to be tied with a companion in matrimony or love literally means to be, quote, with bread throughout your lives together. It is a societal act of commitment and love, inoculated with centuries of meaning and significance. So the next time you share a meal with someone you love, think of this phrase. I thought that was wonderful to find that for us. Well, the image, by the way, that you see for this show is mine, as they all are, a visual poem, and it was one of the tables, or the table, with a particular setting that day on a terrace on an Aegean island at a house I visited 2 summers, one after the other, and where there were many beautifully simple feasts, morning, noon, and night there, like this one, this breakfast scene. And yes, a place of many poems also inspired there, and that was where I was heading one of those summers, and having breakfast at that bakery at the just past daybreak before leaving on the ferry for the island of Kea. So this is from Kea in the Cyclades. From Alpha to Apollo. Cold Alpha, Fellini, Caruso di Stefano, Gavroche with garlic, Ivor Novello, feta with oil, oregano, cicadas, ripe tomatoes, bread, olives, shadows, sun on brown, terraced mountainsides. from the Daily Stoic. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius marvels at, quote, nature's inadvertence. A baker, he writes, makes the dough, kneads it, and then puts it in the oven. Then physics, then nature takes over. Quote, the way loaves of bread split open, Aurelius writes, the ridges are just byproducts of the baking, and yet pleasing somehow. They rouse our appetite without our knowing why. It's a beautiful observation about such a banal part of daily life, something only a poet could see. The Daily Stoic, always an interesting read about the ancients and their wisdom. Elena Minton, bread. The dough rises in the sun, history of the human race inside it, orgies, famines, Christianity, eras when a man could have his arm chopped off for stealing half a loaf. I punch it down, knead the dark flour into the light, let it bake, then set it on the table beside the knife, learning the power cooks have over others, the pleasure of saying, eat. Thank you, Helena Minton. Lots of new poets and poems tonight for you, for us. This is Chana Bloch. Flour and ash. Make flour into dough, she answers, and fire will turn it into food. Ash is the final abstraction of matter. You can just brush it away. She tacks a sheet of paper to the wall, dips her hand in a palette of flour and ash, applies the fine, soft powders with a fingertip, highlighting in chalk and graphite, blending, blurring with her thumb. Today she is working in 7 shades of gray. Outside the door, daylilies in the high flush of summer, about to be fall. Her garden burns red and yellow in the dry August air and is not consumed. Inside, on the studio wall, a heavy particulate smoke thickens and rises. Footsteps grime the snow. The about-to-be-dead line up on the ramp with their boxy suitcases, ashen shoes. When I get too close, she yanks me back. She hovers over her creation, though she too has a mind to brush against that world and wipe it out. Flour and ash. Thank you, Chana Bloch, from Blood Honey, her collection. All right. Questions for you, dear listeners, about breaking bread and bread itself. Well, who do you love or have you loved breaking it with, most especially in your life? What does the aroma of baking or freshly baked bread evoke in you, from you? What's your earliest memory of sharing bread around a table? Did your family have any particular cultural tradition or ritual to do with bread, whether it's making or it's partaking? Are you yourself an amateur baker? I know a few of you out there are. Very good ones, actually. Do you have an all-time favorite bread or dish involving bread, like French toast or bread pudding or maybe a ribollita? Or a beloved bakery? What is it? Or where is it? Why do you savor that so much? How do you greatly like to have your bread or serve it to your family or your friends or guests? Do you have a familiar ritual when you come together to break bread with others? Something you say or do? Any kind of blessing or gesture of appreciation? What would life be without being able to break bread daily or often, simply or otherwise? And what if people came together more often to break bread in a spirit of true community? How might that change the face of society for the better, especially for the friendlier? We had a sense of that, right, with Pablo Neruda's poem there. Back in time when I was married, my wife had a delightful line. She'd say to me, "You make the dough and I'll make the donuts." So a toast to all you breadwinners out there, and not just the bread makers. And yes, to those of you too at home who transmute that quote dough, that quote, into good things for the table, for the household, for the family. And I suppose also on a life note, and we're going to touch on that in a few pieces later. What new waters are you casting your bread on, or desire to? Questions to muse on, and I'd love to hear from you about any musings that you want to share with me or the fellow listeners next time around. I can bring that in if you like. Wikipedia on bread. It is one of the oldest human-made foods, having been of significance since the dawn of agriculture. Evidence from 30,000 years ago in Europe and Australia revealed starch residue on rocks used for pounding plants. It's possible that during this time, starch extract from the roots of plants, such as cattails and ferns, was spread on a flat rock placed over a fire and cooked into a primitive form of flatbread. The oldest evidence has been found in a 14,500-year-old Natufian site in Jordan's northeastern desert. And on cultural significance, no surprise, it has had a significance beyond mere nutrition in many cultures because of its history and contemporary importance. It's also significant in Christianity as one of the elements, of course, alongside wine of the Eucharist. I know that well from growing up as a Catholic boy, and in other religions, including paganism. It is a metaphor for basic necessities and living conditions. And in Russia in 1917, the Bolsheviks promised, quote, peace, land, and bread. And the term breadbasket denotes an agriculturally productive region. I'm going to mention that shortly, what some of them are. I didn't know what they all were. In northern, central, southern, and eastern Europe, bread and salt is offered as a welcome to guests. And in India, life's basic necessities are often referred to as roti, kapra, aur, makan, bread, cloth, and house. So some interesting cultural things for you. And then some quotes to salt in here that I enjoyed finding. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the sky is the daily bread of the eyes. Julia Child, how can a nation be great if its bread tastes like Kleenex? I never heard that. Well, I have to use that somewhere. Hopefully not with anybody who's just made it. And that's what I say to them. No, that wouldn't be good. Chinese proverb, if you have 2 loaves of bread, sell one and buy a lily. And M.F.K. Fisher, great food writer back in time, the smell of good bread baking, like the sound of lightly flowing water, is indescribable in its evocation of innocence and delight. Yes, I agree with her. Maybe you do too. Let's take a moment, close our eyes, and remember that wonderful scent memory. Yes, the bread baskets of the world. This is from worldatlas.com. As I said, I was aware of some, but not all. And how about you? Maybe you're even from one of them. That would be interesting. They do contribute to the global food supply in some of the most significant, the central Black Earth region of Russia, Southeast Asia, the Canadian prairies, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, the rice fields in southern China, the San Joaquin Valley of California, and Brazil. Some. And then, of course, so many types of bread. So many kinds. Baguettes, brioches, ciabattas, focaccias, pitas, sourdoughs, arepas, bagels, chapatis, English muffins, grissini, taralli, khachapuri, nakobrot, lavash, limpa. That's from Sweden. I haven't had that before. Mariketa, matzah, naan, obinon, pai bao, Hong Kong, pane carasau, that's Sardinia, roti gambang, Indonesian, sanggak, shaobing, soda bread, tortillas, vanokas, yufkas, and zops. And the list goes way on. I hadn't seen this in a while, but I knew I had it somewhere, so I went and found it. This was an homage to a once splendid bakery, a French boulangerie, that had some outpost in New York years back, Maison Kaiser. I can still taste their baguettes, and Yes, my taste buds smile at that. This was Heavenly Leavening. I wrote this in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn in 2016 for Maison Geyser. Heavenly Leavening is definitely involved, imbued directly and incantationally by the Maison K bakers, as every mouthful of baguette, every morsel of golden wand, toasted or still providentially warm from the hearth, Frenchly buttered, olive-oiled, or bufala mozzarellaed, is an eye-closing experience, from glorious in excelsis crust to yeastful ambrosial epicenter. If they were still around and I could lay my hands on it, I would be having that after the show tonight. Yes, slathered with French butter. Oh, my goodness. Maybe I'll not be able to get through the show now. I'll be too tingling about that. I wanted to tell you a couple of things that were interesting, but I think I'm going to go on because I can tell you another time, maybe if we come around to this again. But there were a couple of from Gastro Obscura. There were different prepared foods to do with bread that I thought were interesting. I'll just quickly, I won't read about them, but canned bread, a New England tradition of steaming bread in coffee tins, was one. Petulaipa, a Scandinavian using tree bark in the flour, and salt-rising bread. Bacteria that cause gangrene are the magic ingredient in this cheese-scented loaf, and that is from the United States. So, yeah, you could also look that up for yourself in gastroobscura.com. Okay, Bill Holm, bread soup, an old Icelandic recipe. Start with the square heavy loaf, steamed a whole day in a hot spring until the coarse rye, sugar, yeast grow dense as a black hole of bread. Let it age and dry a little. Then soak the old loaf for a day in warm water flavored with raisins and lemon slices. Boil it until it is thick as molasses. Pour it in a flat white bowl. Ladle a good dollop of whipped cream to melt in its brown belly. This soup is alive as any animal, and the yeast and cream and rye will sing inside you after eating for a long time. That was delightful. Thank you, Bill Holm. That's from his collection, Playing the Black Piano. Bread soup. Darcy Denigan in the bakery. It was in August, such a lovely summer, that I began the massacring, the flour killing, feeding the sunflowers to the industrial dough mixer. Soon there was enough yellow petal pulp for 12 loaves, for 12 times 10 loaves, for 1,200 loaves. One of the food critics in town came around to inquire about my baking system. I glanced at the machete, propped next to the ovens. Toward October, in what Auburn weather, I still felt it, the substance of the soul, the libidinal, terrible whatever. I sat out back with the two counter girls, Haley and Shayla. There was one cigarette, and we were sharing. Morning is the horizon of all desire, we were commiserating. But Haley and Shayla, they sell Kaiser rolls and sliced Sicilian, and then they leave and put on a fancy tank top and go out for the evening. They go, even though the little white clematis cling to the fences. At dawn, the buds were dying as a sweet white bread was rising. November, how beautiful were the yellow mums in the thin, wintry sun. The bread they made had the hue of golden potatoes. December, specks of red in lit windows, amaryllis that I stole and slaughtered and sold inside a pain de mie roll. I love how in the cold my breath flowers before me. January, February, I hacked through the ice to get at flower fetuses. The breads were very seedy. Spring was really beginning. Baguettes made entirely of white peonies, brioche from the blood of purple lilacs, long lines outside the bakery's door. What is the secret ingredient? I confessed, flowers, please put me away, I am desperate. Summer, I could not go through another. The woodbine had barely begun, and already the mornings were full of the scent of them. Not one honeysuckle would go unsucked unless I closed the doors. Every season is too full of longing, and rechristened myself Flora. I drank a vat of rose water and put both my wrists through the sliter. And then I began to bleed a white powder, flour. And then you came in. I would have known you even if you were not wearing in your buttonhole a carnation. The bakery is closed, I said tersely. I was bleeding profusely. I loved you even before you said nothing breaks more slowly, more silently than bread. With my blood pouring out as a fine dry flower, let me confess before I expire, there on the counter, in that vase, fresh and pink, is the corsage I was keeping for our dance. In the bakery. From her collection, Madam X. Thank you. Darcy Denikin. Well, how about that? That was a fun, interesting, and very imaginative poem. Well, back to Wikipedia for a moment was to look up some famous bakers or notable bakers. And there were quite a few. There was a Charles Jouffin, chief baker aboard the RMS Titanic, who actually was one of the few survivors of that. Angelo Motta, the Milanese baker famous for his revival of panettone. And of course, Lionel Poilin, noted for the excellence of his sourdough, still a bakery in his name and his family's name there. And Regnault, fictional baker and poet in Edmond Rostand's play Cyrano de Bergerac. Yes, so we toast all the bakers, past and present, who made and make marvelous bread, especially the artisanal makers and preservers of beautiful traditions. Yeah. Well, talking a little bit more about customs, bread eating and serving customs, I thought you'd like a little more on the French, especially on their baguettes. And this is from spoonuniversity.com, a couple of little tidbits. The writer wrote here, the French eat it at every meal, breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea, which is le goûter, apéritifs, dinner, and it's no surprise because the bread is that good. And there are some rules for eating it. Etiquette, you place it on the table and not on your plate or on a napkin, ever. It's torn into bite-sized pieces, so you can both enjoy your meal and converse at the same time. You do not finish all the bread during your starter. An important rule in France for eating bread is to follow, is to leave some bread behind for your main meal so you can eat it during your meal, and then have bread to wipe your plate clean after eating, assuming you leave a clean plate. But that's good manners there. And I, was reading that, and I was remembering when I was married, came to be married into a very Italian family, the use by everybody of the heel of the bread to, quote, scarpetta, the dish. It became a good habit. I took that on too. And from CNNTravel.com, La Baguette, Secrets of France's Most Addictive Food. And I love this. Baker Christian Vabre is squeezing down gently on a baguette in order to make it, quote, sing. As he presses down, the crust is collapsing in on itself to produce a staticky, crackling sound. You can tell a good baguette by the way it sings, he says. Le pain qui chante, or bread that sings, is an expression among French bakers and is one of the hallmarks of a well-baked baguette, Vabre says. How about that, the singing baguette? I maybe have to write a poem about that and send it to Monsieur Vabre. Did you know that in Ireland, they have a tradition of banging bread against the walls of their houses on New Year's Eve? The idea is that bad luck and evil spirits are chased away and good luck is invited in. And it ensures that the coming year will be filled with an abundance of bread and other food. How about that? I must ask my Irish friend David Dunn if he does this or remembers this as a boy growing up in Ireland. Note to self. Richard Levine, bread. Each night, in a space he'd make between walking and purpose, my grandfather donned his one suit in our still dark house and drove through Brooklyn's deserted streets following trolley tracks to the bakery. There he'd change into white linen work clothes and cap, and in the absence of women, his hands were both loving, well into dawn and throughout the day, kneading, rolling out, shaping each astonishing moment of yeasty predictability in that windowless world lit by slightly swaying naked bulbs, where the shadows staggered, woozy with the aromatic warmth of the work. Then the suit and drive again. At our table graced by a loaf that steamed when we sliced it, softened the butter and leavened the very air we'd breathe, he'd count us blessed. Wonderful. Richard Levine, thank you. Bread, from his collection A Tide of 100 Mountains. Well, I've used the metaphors, the analogies, the symbols of bread and baking and bread breaking myself for various friends in my life and in my heart. Here's a few. This is for a Basque soul sister. This was for her 40th birthday 3 years back. 40 loaves. The miracle of you, from 4 decades of baking, of you who are ever in the making, in the rising, with the bread of your spirit, your warm heart, your leavened beauty, that daily feeds many, that can, will, as you live forward, as you live and love sunward, feed, fill the senses of multitudes. Ruth Guimara, out to you. Let her know that I shared that with all of you listeners in the listening world out there tonight and wherever these programs ripple out across time and space. This was for a Brooklyn soul sister, Nicole Centeno Hargreaves. This was on her birthday in 2019. Spirit of the Rye, woman of 100 grains, source of the bread of good words and deeds, flowered from the heart. Hearty bread that feeds souls, sons to strangers. Woman of sprouting ways, who thrives through times, places, weathers, and cold winters, bringing fields of gold and green to life and savor. Beautiful woman, long and slender, earth lover, seed sower, nourisher, sun catcher, deep-rooted spirit of the rye. Baked Goods by Aimé Nezu Kuma Tatil. Flour on the floor makes my sandals slip and I tumble into your arms. Too hot to bake this morning, but blueberries begged me to fold them into moist muffins. Sticks of rhubarb plotted a whole pie. The windows are blown open and a thick fruit tang sneaks through the wire screen and into the home of the scowly lady who lives next door. Yesterday, a man in the city was rescued from his apartment, which was filled with 1,000 rats. Something about being angry because his pet python refused to eat. He let the bloom of fur rise over the little gnarly blue rug, over the coffee table, the kitchen countertops, and pip through each cabinet, snip at the stumpy bags of sugar, the cylinders of salt. Our kitchen is a riot of pots, wooden spoons, melted butter. So be it. Maybe all this baking will quiet the angry voices next door, if only for a brief whiff. I want our summers to always be like this. A kitchen wrecked with love. A table overflowing with baked goods, warming the already warm air. After all the pots are stacked, the goodies cooled, and all the counters wiped clean, let us never be rescued from this mess. Delightful. Thank you, Aimé Nezu Kuma Tatil. I hope I pronounced that right. That's from her collection, Lucky Fish. There were 2 films that came to mind, by the way, both, as it happens, Italian films. You may know one or both. The class, there's sort of a cult film, I guess we could say, from 1974, was Bread and Chocolate with the actor Nino Manfredi. Which if you don't know or know, it's kind kind of reminiscent of Chaplin's later features, but the lead character looks a little bit like Chaplin, actually, curiously. He's a southern Italian waiter named Nino who goes to Switzerland to try out for a restaurant job and is caught in a net of discrimination while he just can't get anything right with the Swiss. A tricky lot. And a great favorite of mine, so charming. It's a love story with a sort of suddenly a couple, an older pair of people, set in unexpected parts of Venice. And it's Pane e Tulipani, bread and tulips with Bruno Ganz. Definitely see that. That's so lovely. I was in Amsterdam one of many times. This was in 2001. And there was a lovely sunflower bread we bought at a local baker. And as a light bearer, a light keeper, as I am, it struck me, light lover, this way, in a poem, as a poem. Zonnebrot, sunflower bread. If we eat this bread, will our bodies shine? Well, I thought we must speak a moment at least or so of toast. Who doesn't love it? It's sort of a universal pleasure, is it not? Well, I have a couple of poems about it for us, but I'll tell you first about, from Insider.com, is what people put on their toast in different countries. They say it's a canvas for endless possibilities. Is that not true? Aside from avocado toast, sort of the vogue and trendy thing, I think, still. And good. I like it, too. So the French, of course, their baguettes with jam, tartines. I personally was wildly fond of pain au chocolat, the first I ever had, the first time I ever went to Paris. I must have had 4 in a row. It was off the charts with a big café au lait or two of café au lait. And, of course, all the beautiful wands, yes, of warm bread, iconic, poetic, especially when you attach it to a Frenchman in a beret on an old bicycle in a striped blouson pedaling along with that wand and his wicker basket coming from the open-air market. Well, in Singapore and Malaysia, kaya toast, K-A-Y-A, is the norm. It's either charcoal grilled or toasted, butter and a traditional jam made from coconut and eggs spread on each slice and sandwiched together. Fettunta, which is basically an Italian garlic bread, I guess we could say. In Sweden, they top it with a shrimp. It's named Skagen, was named for a fishing port in northern Denmark. The Australians spread Vegemite on there. Oh, Lord. Not for me. Never been into that. But some of them also have, the Aussies like fairy bread, buttered toast drowned in, quote, hundreds and thousands of candy sprinkles or rainbow nonpareil. Oh, boy. Wow, you'd have to have a sweet tooth for that. England, it's accompanied by beans, sausage, and eggs often. It's very classic. A sweet toast popular in Argentina, dulce de leche, topping of choice. The Indians have a French toast version. It's Bombay toast. I never knew about that. Flavors like French toast, but adding turmeric and black pepper. And in Morocco, after searing the bread, buttered, of course, in a skillet, liberal amounts of honey sizzling on each side yields a common breakfast in home kitchens. Hungry, dear listeners? Perhaps you are. All this talk. I'm going to save this poem. It was actually a poem I wrote about my brother and his life partner, Nancy, who are great lovers of English muffins, called Muffin Eaters. You can write me if you want me to send you a copy, but in the interest of time and talking about other things, I'm going to go right by that for now. I did want to mention, though, it was such a dramatic thing that involved bread in the United States. I thought of this, of the hardships in then, but also in the present, and in many countries now, including the war-torn, where food is scarce and spirits are low. And this is Breadlines, in which poverty-stricken and hungry Americans queued for free food in the Great Depression because of all the unemployment. And yes, They were common in many cities in the 1930s. And, we've never lived, most of us, through anything like that, and I hope we never do. So we go back to sort of, again, to Neruda, and what was he talking about, coming together to make sure we always have bread and have enough for each other and share it with each other. And there was a very poignant story in there, oft-repeated story, about a teacher in West Virginia back in the 30s who directed a young girl to go home and eat. The girl replied, "I can't. This is my sister's day to eat." Well, are you well nourishing yourselves, dear listeners? Literally, but also your mind, your heart, your spirits, your souls. Going hungry. What happens when you don't feed your heart, your soul, the deep nourishment it needs, it deserves? The daily regimen, bread and wine of joy, of deep loving, of being deeply loved. As essential as the air you breathe, to sustain the whole of living. Going hungry, going without this way, without this bounty of milk and honey for your spirit body, flesh and blood body, is no way for anyone to be or choose, no way for you to thrive or stay vitally alive, especially when it's all there for the inviting, the allowing, and partaking. It's also a poem I'm going to just point you to. It's Bookmobile by Joyce Sutphin, and it's from her collection Coming Back to the Body, and she talks about the fresh bread of the page of a book in the Bookmobile. It's bread to her. Lovely. Well, one more from Holland from another time, from 1998. So often when I think of bread, I immediately think of picnics and crusty, chewy loaves I had of them in different countries and seasons, with dear friends especially, like this time at this alfresco feast in Holland, the koeien picnic, the cow's picnic, east of Holland, on the River Vecht, spread out in the shade on the dike above the water, ringed by cows, a déjeuner sur l'herbe, of rosé and laughter, tomatoes and clouds, pâté lathered on bread, stories spooned on tongues, hard-boiled eggs eaten with salt and sunshine, a basket of fruits and friendships shared, bodies bared and bathed in the Vecht, borne by the same current that carries our blue boat back home. In a bit of a riff on the ancient Roman way to distract and divert the people by giving them bread and circuses, entertainments. I'm not so sure that that's not in some form happening right now in the world. That's another story altogether. This is, Circus Maximus. Make mind minimus. No public spectacles for me. No massive entertainments, excessive processions, gladiator fights, chariot races. I prefer a quieter life, where the festivals are the generous intervals of communing over tables with wine and friends, communing over fields and wave-washed shores with nature, feasting on books, images, words of inspiration, on rich moments of introspection and reverie, sharing rare ceremonies of whole living, pure loving. Let's make hay while the sun shines. Make song while our voices shine. Make love while our bodies shine. Make feasts while our appetites shine. Make each day bright with heart, come rain or shine. Well, we're bending now into our last segment of sharings and musings and a nod to the notion of casting bread on the waters of our life journeys. This was a blessing for my very dear friend and mentor, David Melnick, up in Canada on his baptism and his conversion in 2004. As you cast your bread upon new waters, now you find new shelter for your faith and soul, safe under the mighty wings and dazzling feathers of June's loving Creator, whose strength you too will trust to soothe any terrors by night and shield any arrows that may fly by day. When the words are said and the ceremonies are done, let the bread of belief you cast upon these bright waters bring you nearer to your deepest self and sacredness, keep you close to the courage and spirit of your devoted wife and her gracefulness, and fill your following days with the love set upon you, the love that resides in you, the love that circles round you in the open hearts and arms of your family and friends and your fellow men, both well and never met, all seeking the same solace, peace, and hopefulness. Now to you, my dear David Melnick, and all of you. And this next was around my own casting. Pain perdu, lost bread. This was written at the Ansonia Hotel, New York City, January 2017. The last 50 years were spent casting mine on life's waters, on many inner and outer seas, rivers, marshes, and streams, freely, generously. And now it has come back, not lost, but returned in a plenitude of loaves of love and kindness, goodwill, invitations to a greater dance, delighted seats at flowing feasts. Dylan Thomas, this bread I break. This bread I break was once the oat, this wine upon a foreign tree, plunged in its fruit. Man in the day or wine at night laid the crops low, broke the grapes' joy. Once in this time wine the summer blood knocked in the flesh that decked the vine. Once in this bread the oat was merry in the wind. Man broke the sun, pulled the wind down. This flesh you break, this blood you let make desolation in the vein. Were oat and grape born of the central root and sap. My wine you drink, my bread you snap. Thank you, Dylan Thomas. Well, I was telling this story, or an aspect of this story, the other week. This was from August 2020 on Quannacontag Beach, where I'm often walking, Weekapaug, here in Rhode Island. More fish than water. The shore break awash with them, striped bass the size of bread loaves, hungry, open-mouthed, crowding out the seawater as they chase the silver bullets of rain-bait flying, spraying in multitudes under the frothy, glassy surface. David Whyte has this calling poem, I would say a clarion call, that we need to have more than ever and to heed more than ever as the world gorges on, I would say, drowns in masses of information at the expense of making simple, generous human gestures. Loaves and fishes. This is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. Forget the news and the radio and the blurred screen. This is the time of loaves and fishes. People are hungry, and one good word is bread for 1,000. Thank you, David Whyte, from the House of Belonging, Loaves and Fishes. Well, I'm pairing that with Naomi Shihab Nye's poem, with our man White's poem. Hers is kindness. I've shared it in another broadcast, but felt so fitting here around our theme. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Kindness. Thank you. Naomi Shihab Nye from her collection Words Under the Word. And a reprise of Derek Walcott's poem Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself, arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome, saying, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Thank you, Derek Walcott. Yes, friends, let us feast on our lives, our getting to be alive, our good selves, our good fortune. In the great scheme of things, between and around the sweeps of history, the leaps of science, the frontier crossings of technology, the arcing and blending of cultures and philosophies, are the epically simple wonders of loving and being loved, seen, heard, breaking bread with friends, finding meaning in each day, feeling moments of sheer aliveness, wholeness, radiant here-ness, appreciating all the gifts, the remarkable, irreplaceable gifts of yourself and this heavenly, earthly life. Next to last, this poem from a Thanksgiving past, 2019, What If You Forget the Turkey? However tender and moist, the golden skin supremely crisp, the stuffing and the gravy, however savory, forget the mashed potatoes, the pumpkin pie, and all the wine. What if you simply remember why you gather around a table of kindred others to begin with? This day, or any day. Contemplate what fineness, fullness of art you can bring to each table, each other, before you even arrive to sit there. What good stories and nourishing reveries, poetries you can spread out on, sing out to the table. How greatly it matters every day you're here. Every time you take time, make room to feast on your life, to toast your one and onlyness, and the lives and specialness of the others, dear and near or far, who make it all the more joyful, flavorful, worthwhile, while you're here on earth. Then on with, savoring the rest and grateful tastes of it all. And last for now, in our time breaking bread together, virtually and gently, the daily bread. Maybe the greatest gift you can give is the daily bread of your body, the daily fruit of your heart, the daily wine of your mind, the daily spice of your voice, the daily water of your ever-arising spirit. Thank you again for leaning in and feeling in, and for sharing these shows with others. Feel free to post this show or whole playlist link to your social media. Always appreciate it. I always invite and greatly appreciate your comments, your reflections, informations, or inspirations from listening, and likewise donations of thanks and support for the shows and how they engage, enliven, and illuminate you and others. And if there's any theme you'd like me to devote a broadcast to, do send me an email, colin@thepoetorialist.com. And what about your experience of this show on Breaking Bread? I would love to know. If you are contributing, you can use Venmo to fivefold, FIVEFOLD at pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email. Or you can simply send along a check, P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island 02891. Or, of course, donate through my site in the Donate tab at thepoetorialist.com. Patrons can, yes, sponsor or host me seasonally as a working poet in residence for an agreed time and an agreed place in the U.S. or elsewhere in the world to create a new flight of poetic art dedicated to them. Email me to explore. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the floating poetry playlist. I do hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, break bread often and joyfully, wholeheartedly. Cast bread on new waters of all kinds, freely, on the waters of possibility for your life, your future. And remember David White's call to nourish others and offer one or more good words to those you know, meet, or pass in your day to day. It's bread for the spirit people are hungry for. For them, it's manna from heaven. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.